Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Matt the Family Guy, Kent the Cat Guy, Jacqueline from JP Mint, and Greg the Single Guy, bringing you episodes from around the world about the best kept secret in education. You got it, international teaching. Welcome to the show. That we're on video now through the YouTube and the YouTube anyway. We are here with our another episode on video and podcasting. I am Greg, the Single Guy, and of course JP Mint is right here. How you doing, JP?
Good morning from Mexico, and I have a mint shirt on for those people that are in video. Hello. Yeah, my favorite color.
And you know, to tell you the truth, I don't know where Kent is. He might be playing pickleball or whatever we call those other, maybe tennis. We went through a whole episode of different things like that. But, all right, so we have a wonderful guest this time. It is Tico Oms, and we usually people call him Tico. So welcome to the show, Tico. How you doing?
I'm doing great. And I'm in Miami
and
Beach. We're all in warm
I was going to say, where are you? Where are you calling in from? Miami. Say hello to Miami for all of us from the ITP. I do have, bring us in a little bit, Tico, before we talk about other things. Let's see where you fit in with education. What's your journey like? Just a little elevator version, if you would, please.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, you know, I wasn't always in education. I have an engineering degree originally. Then I got an MBA from North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I worked for Dell Computers. I speak, read, and write Japanese, which I learned when I was teaching English in Japan. And so I went to work with Dell Japan, and I became product manager for laptops for Dell Computers in Asia Pacific. But I was always an educator at heart, and I knew this at an early age that was my calling. I did the MBA because that's what you were supposed to do, I thought. And so I really wanted to make a mid-career switch into education. And like a lot of folks, I thought I might do it when I was 66 or retired and be a teacher. And I had one of those moments of reflection. And I thought, well, I am going to wait till later to do what I know that I want to do now. And so I made this switch, and I got a master's of education, and I became a teacher. I knew it would be international, so I almost immediately after receiving my master's of education, I went to Berlin, and then from Berlin, Singapore American School, International School Bangkok, and International School Basel, before returning to the States because my two kids are in university in the States, and I wanted to be decently near them. And I know it's an elevator kind of pitch and it should be short, but also I thought I would retire a teacher. Like I really, it was a journey of the heart. I love the classroom. I love teaching. I think that's probably my biggest gift or skill is teaching. But because of that business background and the MBA and that kind of experience, I was, I don't want to say pushed, but a lot of opportunities and some pressure to get into leadership. And so I did a lot of leadership, deputy principal and then principal at both the middle school and high school levels. And now I've switched again, and I'm a little more entrepreneurial. I'm a leadership coach, and I'm particularly now have a lot of aspiring leaders that I help. And I'm on the board of a new group called ACES, Association for the Advancement of Instructional Coaching in International Schools. It's new. I'm on the board on that. And then I help ALOC, the Association of International Educators and Leaders of Color, and I support the Aspiring Leaders of Color program there. So that's where I am now.
So much to unpack. I am so excited to have you on.
It's like the military. You're part of
We're
the
going to put all
ACES
those acronyms in the show notes.
Wow.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much to unpack. So I want to start from the beginning. You mentioned Japan, and you mentioned teaching English in Japan. Can you tell us how old you were? I mean, how old you were? Like, was this right after university? Was this, yeah. And then was it EPIC? No, EPIC is Korea. The JET, was it the JET program or
the one that was there? Yeah. So yeah, look, I studied engineering, and you know, you're young and you have to make these decisions. And I was good at math, so everybody said, "Be an engineer." because you'll get a good job and you'll make money. And it turned out I never took anything apart to figure out how it worked. I didn't enjoy changing the oil in the car. That wasn't my thing. I was good at math. I was a terrible engineer. And so after graduation, I just really needed to rethink. And I had an opportunity to go to Japan because in university, one of my roommates was Japanese. And he said, go over there, teach English. It'll be easy. And so I did that. And I thought I would stay maybe 6 months, maybe a year. And I ended up staying 5.5 years and studying Japanese intensively while I was there. I loved it. Loved it.
And whereabouts in Japan was that?
That was in Osaka. And so Japanese.
Ooh, that's a nice one.
Say that you didn't really learn Japanese in Osaka. You learned Osaka Ben, which is the dialect there.
But they're also known for food, right? Like those octopus balls and.
Yeah, look, I mean, and when I worked with Dell, I went to live in Tokyo. Osaka is just the best. It has a very unique culture. They love their food. They're a little more outgoing folks, a little friendlier. They don't. Yeah, there's a rivalry between Tokyo and Osaka. And I have to say, I sit on the Osaka side of that rivalry.
A rivalry over like octopus
cities.
balls? Is that what we're saying?
No, like cities, like Toronto and Ottawa in Canada, because everybody always thinks it's the capital.
A weird moment there with octopus balls. I'm like, what?
The food is.
So they put out little chunks of octopus in these doughy balls, but it was fascinating. I was videoing it, how they make it, because it's sort of almost like an automatic autonomous robot that's making it, but at the same time not. Anyhow, if you Google octopus balls in Osaka, you'll see the little videos. Right. Everybody films these things because they're fascinating.
I have one of those robots in my kitchen right there.
Of course, yeah. Right it's called takoyaki. And takoyaki is available especially in festivals and events like that. It's closely associated with festivals. The takoyaki, nice. But you can get them anywhere. They're super good. But they're an acquired taste for many people, too. Yeah.
Yeah, I skipped it. I was like, as soon as I found out what was inside.
So you conquered Japanese, and then you went to Germany to learn the German language and teach, or how did that work?
Yeah, actually, the next step was going to get my MBA. I'd been in Japan having a great time. And then it was, again, that moment of reflection thinking, I should probably grow up. I'm 27 years old now, and I didn't intend to stay as long as I did. And so, yeah.
Get a real job, because international isn't, right? That's a lot of people think.
You nailed it. That's right. And I thought I was being irresponsible. I was traveling in Southeast Asia, learning Japanese, playing soccer. I was having a great time. I was bartending as a part-time job to practice my Japanese. So it was fun. And then I thought, wait, am I being irresponsible? So I got into a great MBA program, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and thought this is what I'm supposed to do. And then I got a job with Dell Japan, partly because of the language skills and some connections I had there. So that was my path. Yeah. And
so you went back to Japan after the MBA then?
That's right. And that's when I went to Tokyo. And then I was promoted to lead laptops in Asia Pacific. So then I moved to Penang, Malaysia, where Dell's Asia Pacific headquarters were. Yeah. And
what's Malaysia like compared to Japan? I've never been. I really, really want to get to Malaysia soon.
Malaysia's fantastic. It's rich culture, very multicultural, great food, welcoming, warm folks. So yeah, I was a big fan. And then in particular, I lived in Penang, and Penang is majority Chinese. It's the only province that is not majority Malay. It's majority kind of Chinese ethnic. And so it has a unique culture there too. And it's an island. So it's fantastic because you're surrounded by beaches and great.
Penang is an island? Oh, I wasn't aware of that. I'd heard of Penang, but I didn't know it was an island.
Yeah, there's an international school there, cute little international school there. Yeah. Probably for Dell folks.
And so you were still working for Dell at that time. Mm-hmm. And then when did you start to think about teaching again? When did you say, maybe this isn't for me?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There was more to that story than I said. I actually did those 10-day meditation retreats where you do a vow of silence. And so I did one of those in Thailand. There's an English-speaking abbot And so I did that. Look, it's not just a vow of silence. You just don't communicate. You don't write in your journal. You don't listen to music. You don't read books. It's all supposed to be about your inner journey. And
I
so
would fail. Fail totally.
Look at you,
Horribly.
Greg. I don't think I could do it either. I really couldn't. You're talking to two podcast hosts here. We thrive on interaction and communication.
How did you do it for 10 days? My parents said the only way to shut me up is to feed me or put me underwater. I mean, like, you had 10 days of vow of silence? Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, I just thought that might be like a Saturday Night Live skit, putting you two in, a temple with a vow of silence.
I love it. I love it. Yes. Oh my gosh. Like, we'd be communicating with hand gestures for sure. Like, like, look at me. Look at me.
You couldn't. I mean, they said that.
No,
you don't make eye contact and nod. So I'm friendly too. So I love, come on, like a lot of educators.
You want to say good morning with your eyes and.
Yeah. And we thrive on connection, right? And so I also thrive on connection. So if someone's walking past me and there's a vow of silence, I'm going to make eye contact or a thumbs up or, they're like, stop doing that. Stop doing
I'm shivering.
Okay, so you did this vow of silence. You did this, non-communication. So that forces you to look inwards. Is that what happens?
That's exactly right. It's the inner journey, and it's kind of
meditation,
calming yourself and all that. And in that program, by the way, Greg, I'm thinking of you. It's the first few days are terrible, and then there's a kind of a day 6 or 7 when you're probably unearthing some things that might not be so pleasant, or some things that you really have been avoiding confronting, and so that's another time. So the folks who put this on know there are certain days that there's high failure rates where people walk. Like I'm done with it.
First 30 seconds for me. Can't do it. Can't do it. There goes the podcast. It's over.
Hey, let's bring the podcast to one of those.
It's like anti-podcast right there. Anti-audio.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
well,
so you made the 10 days. So like you had a roller coaster of a time. Mm-hmm. And what did you discover? And in terms
That's
of
personal.
Of teaching.
Come on, JP.
No, in terms of teaching, what did you discover?
Sure. I think a lot of folks when they're a mid-career switcher in education, there's this kind of myth that, well, you weren't good at business, or there's a recession, so suddenly we have business people looking to become teachers. There's these stereotypes of the move. That wasn't for me. It was just rediscovering that that's what I wanted to do. Look, when I applied for business school, there was an essay question that said, what's your ultimate career goal? And everyone's going to write, I want to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or I want to start my own company and have 200 employees or whatever. I wrote, I want to be a teacher. Nobody writes that for an MBA program. And when I got there, even the admissions officer, here's that crazy Tico who wrote he wants to be a teacher and he applied for an MBA program. So I always knew that that's the switch I wanted to make. I just thought it was going to be in my 60s. And this retreat helped me realize why. Why would you wait? I'm not motivated by money. I want financial security, but I don't need wealth, right? And I want to do something that's meaningful and satisfying. And so that realization came strong, and I decided to act on it.
So you had to go back to Malaysia, give your notice, pack up, and then head off to, I guess at that point you didn't have a teaching degree, so you needed to go back to the States.
That's right. So I had to get a master's of education with a certificate lined up. And when you make a mid-career switch and you want to get into international education, you don't want to end up waiting. You need a brand, and I was able to get into Harvard, and so I got a Harvard Master's of Education from Harvard Graduate School of Education. It was a great.
That'll
program.
Open doors.
There's I want to learn from the best, and then there's that practical thing of opening doors as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So.
And that's how and why you got into Berlin so quickly, because a lot of people need to wait to get some experience before they get to Europe. It's sort of that brass ring in the sky.
That's right. And I think being a math teacher also helps. So I had a few things that made the supply and demand work in my favor.
Ooh, okay.
So, yeah.
So how was that adjustment moving from Asia to Europe? With a little bit of US in between, but that must have been a bit of an adjustment.
Yeah. I say Berlin is one of the world's best cities from mid-May to mid-October. And then from mid-October to about mid-May, I'm not so sure. It's one of the, it's gray. It's dark.
For the winter? Yeah.
It's so cold. So, but it was wonderful. And my dad was in the U.S. Army. That's part of my comfort with moving. So we had lived in Germany growing up, and we had lived in Italy growing up. I think, Greg, earlier you'd mentioned some kind of connection with Department of Defense schools. I attended Department of Defense schools as a kid.
Ah, look at that right there. We have proof in the pudding now. Yeah. We talked a little bit about that from Dodds, or, it's really interesting. I have German background too, but I also have Italian background. It's great. I can relate to all your stories. I'm impressed with how many different schools you've been at, and it sounds like you're like JP. You have gone from teacher or even another career into teaching, and then from teaching into leadership positions. And I think that's fascinating because you still keep your eye on the ball, which is basically students. And I love that about admin that are going up through the ranks, are homegrown, and you go through the teaching and then you become an admin. It's not because you're just going fast tracking to admin, but I love the fact that you spend the time teaching. Hopefully your goal is still on students, right? That's your student focus. Hopefully, I know JP seems like that kind of an admin, or was, and I hope that you are too. I don't know. What do you have to say to that?
I'm with you. I said I was a reluctant leader. I didn't want it, and I had opportunities to go into leadership. Some people really push and work so hard to become a leader. I was doing the opposite. I was getting involved in doing extra things because I had a certain skill set that I brought with me. But then, I'd be off. Why don't you just take these classes off and just focus on these new responsibilities you have? Like, no, I'm going to teach and do this because that's my happy place is being with students. And in some ways, Greg, I'm glad you asked that. That's my full circle right now, is gone into leadership, have enjoyed it. But I'm going back into leadership coaching because that's a little bit closer to that calling, where I'm caring for others, I'm thinking about others, I'm centering others, and seeing if I can help. And that was the joy in teaching as well. So, yeah.
Tico, it sounds like you probably went through a very similar process like myself, where you start to realize we're of that age, by the way, my birthday today, 52, but we become a certain age and we're like, oh, I think we're the experts now. like, how did that happen? I still feel like I'm in my 20s and not knowing what I'm doing. But then you realize you're meeting people in their 20s or 30s and going, oh, actually, I know a little bit more. Okay, so I can help. I can pay it forward.
Yeah,
I wish you'd tell my kindergartners that. If you need to tell my kindergartners that I'm a teacher also. I'm sitting in class today, and I'm teaching. I'm a specialist, so I teach like a makerspace, Tico. And I'm sitting there with my students today, and they don't even think I'm a teacher. I'm like, someone tell the kids that I'm a teacher too, because they're like, well, we need to go and ask our teacher. And I said, but I'm the teacher. She's like, no, yep, no, Mister, you're not the teacher. Our teacher is Miss So-and-so. I'm like, what? What's going on? No, you're right, though. At our age, we've gone through a lot of processes, and you're right, JP. It's that false sense almost that, it's a real sense. Like, I've been down that road before, and I've gone through these experiences, and you do have the experience. And at our age, if I can speak for you two, too, you probably agree with me. At our age, we have been down the road a couple times, right? Mm-hmm. We're still learning every day. I don't know about you guys, but I learn every day from my kindergartners and third and fourth graders, etc. But yes, respond to that too. I'm sorry I interrupted with my joke.
No, I love
Tico.
It. I totally, even in my leadership coaching, sometimes folks have these messages, internal messages, and you say, well, where's the evidence when you tell yourself some kind of self-limiting belief or something like that? What is the evidence really about? And I had to be told externally, because people are coming to me for mentoring. People are asking me questions. I'm kind of a source for advice and guidance. And it wasn't until someone said it to me, you are a really good mentor. You should be a coach, because I'd like to meet with you weekly. And I'm like, me? What, me?
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome. Yeah.
And so I needed an external message to help me see who I was, even though once I reflected, I thought, oh yeah, all the evidence has been sitting right in front of my face all this time that I do have something to offer that way. So, yeah.
So from Berlin, you moved somewhere, and did you move into leadership at that point, or it was still teaching?
No, and I know, part of this podcast is helping folks become comfortable with international education and the job market and how, I mean, it was kismet. So I went to a job fair in Bangkok, and this is when job fairs were really important, right? So what was it, maybe 2004, 2005, one of these huge job fairs, Search or ISS, and I meet a bunch of folks, and they're all math teachers. So usually math teachers come in and think, okay, supply and demand works in my favor. And all of a sudden I'm surrounded by math teachers. And then I speak to a leader who's recruiting, says, man, this is like the first job fair where we have a choice for math teachers. It's going to be great.
Wow.
And so I remember I'm a mid-career switcher. I'm not a department head. I did teach an AP class, but I'm not, these people were examiners for IB, all these like, wow. And I'm married to a non-teaching, partner, and I have 2 kids. So it's 1 teacher, family of 4. So I'm not attractive. There's so many things that make me not attractive. And so I thought, well, this is going to be rough, right? And, it turned out schools want good teachers, and I had great references and things like that. So I did get job offers, but the one that happened was I got the job at Singapore American School, and they had a math opening. And I went to talk to them, and they said, look, man, we can't afford families, but we try not to, and we do have choice right now. And so this is probably not going to happen. Now, I had a couple of other offers out there that were attractive. And then that dinner, the principal is Paul Kamelik, who is just a wonderful man. And at that evening dinner, he came up to me and said, Tico, you have an MBA, you worked in business? And I said, yeah, that's right. He goes, well, we're probably one of the few schools that has a business program, and this afternoon our business teacher resigned. Are you interested? And I thought, yeah, I don't, it never entered my mind that I would teach something that's not math. And then suddenly that door opened, and so we had a conversation about it. And it was really hard because I really enjoy math teaching, and part of your identity becomes what you teach. And so it was hard for me. And I met another head of school who was wonderful, named Tim Carr, who I just met at that job fair, and he was the head of school at American School in Japan at the time. And he gave me very graciously his time. I said, I'm confused and I don't know you that well, but can I have a thought partner? And he said, sure. And I told him my conundrum. Here are a couple of good schools that have offered me math positions, but here's Singapore, and he helped walk me through the pros and cons that made me confident to make that switch into business and go to Singapore American School. And I'm so happy I did. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay,
Greg.
Yeah, Greg, first time, long time listener. No, I raised my hand. I love it. It's sort of fun. You hit the nail on the head, and I wish everybody could listen to this episode and hear that last part of your story. That is why I am this huge fan of face-to-face job fairs, because you went up to a person and just said, listen, can I bend your ear for a second? And that leader from American School in Japan, you weren't on his radar, right? Did he have anything to do with your recruiting? Or did you just pull him aside, right? He wasn't offering you a position you didn't. Yeah. See? And you have all these experts around, and you grab somebody and say, I had fun talking to you. Could I bend your ear and get some advice? I love that, and you only get that at job fairs. And I love that epic. That's just epic in my mind that happened. And it was in a good way, because it's happened. Many different people have had that happen to them. Let's talk to somebody that doesn't have a dog in the fight. I want to talk to somebody that's in the same kind of area, the same international teaching. You're in the same gig. You have nothing to do with my story right now, but can you give me some input from your experience? And that
the
is
new
magic.
perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And
So you decided to go with Singapore American, and switch completely. Not even one math class, like all business, all in.
That's right. So business entrepreneurship and this, but I'm going to go back and kind of address something that Greg said, is that is important for folks who are looking for work. Is Are you flexible? Are you open into hearing different things? Because, it's funny when you look back and you meet someone, you're like, it's Buenos Aires or nothing. And then it's like, but are you open to Uganda?
Yeah.
Right? Are you open to something else? Because if you go with this thing, there's so many unknown factors that lead to a fulfilling experience when you work. And if you haven't done it, you don't understand what a complex tapestry it is to have a rich international school experience. Salary's one of them, sure. Location's one of them, sure. But there's so many things that go into it. And then it is nice to meet a leader who says, oh my gosh, this is about the highest stress thing you have. You're about to make a really important decision in your life. And you are looking for someone to help guide you through it. Of course, we're there for you. And the loyalty I had for this man, Tim Carr, who I never ended up working with, but if we were ever at a conference, I sought him out and said, I don't know if you remember me. And he always remembers me. Of course I remember you. You made a big difference in my life, and I really appreciate that. I still, am grateful for that time. And by the way, we
had a guest
podcast.
Go ahead.
In a vow of silence kind of retreat. I always thought in those job fairs it should be a reality TV show. Where you're just following folks around from interviews.
I think it would be fascinating. Greg, Kent, and I have always said we are open. People, our inbox is open for an invite as a panel. We'll do a live recording of a podcast episode at any of these job fairs. All they need to do is pay for the flights and then put us up at a hotel. But otherwise, we are there. So we're just waiting for those invites to pour in.
But the highs and lows of a job fair, right? Oh, I think I've got
roller coaster.
Pick someone else. And then you've got to make a major life decision, probably jet lagged, probably without complete information, everything like that. It's a unique experience.
It's a pressure cooker as well, because there's a finite time you have access to all these people. So it's a very high stress situation. And so the more people you reach out to and the more connections you make, then you start to feel a little bit more grounded, right? It doesn't feel like everything is on your shoulders because you've got. I just like the finger pointing, like, "Hey, how are you doing?" As you're passing people in the hallway or on the elevator or something, you made a connection earlier, and now you're just checking in with them, and they're your job fair friends.
Yep. Yeah. And
Plus, your former directors are going to these. Some of them, and you might
Hopefully.
run into them, and then you're networking through them because they're talking about you. And I always say it, those directors, those leaders, the recruiters are like a bunch of chatty hens. They're all talking about, just like we're talking about the leaders and with people we don't know. We're just like, hey, did you hear about this school? Yada, yada, in the back corner in our little area. I call it the war room, right? Where the teachers go, and then the admin and the leadership all go into their little room. And we're talking about the leaders in the schools, but the leaders are all in there going, hey, did you check out that guy? That Tico guy, he was really nice. I just talked to him, in the line, or I just talked to Greg in the bathroom, he was washing his hands, but what a energetic guy. And JP, oh my God, she's dancing on the table over there. It's amazing. She's helping like 50 people. But I could go on forever, Tico.
I wanted to bring up a point that we had a podcast guest, Jeff Lindstrom, who's now in Brazil. He was at Cairo American for many, many years, and he always said yes. So, you talked about being flexible as far as what are you going to teach? So he would get into a situation. He's a social studies teacher, so history, maybe some geography thrown in there, maybe some English, but can you teach psychology? Yeah,
yes.
Sure, he would say. He would say, yep.
Can you
and
teach
then he would learn how to do it. Can you do economics? Sure, I could do economics. And he looked up economics. And so it's we're teachers first, and then we do have our areas of expertise. But those areas of expertise, the border is gray. It's like it can be expanded, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because Paul Kamelik is one who used to say that the best answer to what you teach is kids, right? Students.
I'm a great teacher, and I can teach, and I teach to kids. So you need me to I can work it out, right? It's a tool in the box. I hope that leaders are always looking for good teachers and educators rather than a specific position. I'm a true believer that, of course, you have to have the background, and you have to have that kind of knowledge, especially in the higher levels in middle and high, and even in elementary. You have to have certain credentials. You have to have that content knowledge, right? But I believe in a good educator, and they need to match the educator with the position they're looking for, not just the content, right? That's my
Absolutely.
2 cents.
No, I think what you said is really important. Are you centering the students, or are you centering your topic, right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
you have your topic, and you need to have that content knowledge, but you've got to center the students. That's the top priority. And
You sound like a leader. I mean, when did you go into leadership, Tico? I mean, here we're on our journey. We got up there closer.
We're in Singapore. We're getting
and like
there.
JP is saying, you moved up, and did you go into it right away after that? How did it work out? What's the next step?
Well, it was pretty soon. My second year there, I became head of department for a department that included, it was in some ways an everything else type of department. So it wasn't math, it wasn't English. So we had desktop publishing, we had robotics and architecture, we had coding, we had my business classes. So it was a hodgepodge, and we all taught only our own classes. So nobody else taught business but me. Only the person who taught, you know.
You're the head of the specialists. Okay.
You were head of the silos.
That's right. That's right. And so I became a head of department there. And then later on, our trips program was it was huge. For Singapore American School, it's called interim semester. It was 58 trips, 58 of 20 students and 2 teachers all over the world. And it's a handful to manage. And one of the vice principals was managing it, but they couldn't do their role because this was so time consuming. And so they asked me if I was willing to do it, and I said yes. This is what you were saying.
Oh my gosh, that's my dream job. That is my dream job, I think.
Yes. and
58 trips. Imagine the logistics expertise you need, Greg. I was the Discover Oman Week Without Walls coordinator for a few years, and that's what got me into admin because I loved that portion of the job so much. It was organizing 12 trips all throughout Oman, but there was a budget like you wouldn't believe. I won't mention it, but it was a huge budget, and my stipend on top of it was a great stipend to pay for the extra time because you're teaching. I was a full-time teacher. And then I had this, so I would do it after school or do it in the morning or do it on the weekends. But I loved that part. I loved the organization, trying to match the chaperones with their trips, give them some kind of voice in their choices because I had
58
I had been a chaperone
ones?
and I wasn't given a choice. But yeah, 58
It's like
trips is
herding
amazing.
cats. That's like herding cats.
It was a lot.
No way.
It was a lot. And frankly, when everybody came back safe was a heck of a relief because you're talking about thousands of kids out there. And
Well, I tell you what, JP would be great at that. Every kid would come back safe because ever since JP joined our podcast, anybody that can keep Kent and I in order and make sure that we're on time and we're doing things the right way, JP's already got Kent and I organized, and he'll attest to that. So I don't know, Matt.
So
I can
Tico,
imagine she can do 58. Right.
So Tico, you moved out of the classroom and into full-time trip management?
No.
He stayed in the class.
That's where I said there were different opportunities so that one I did. I think I dropped one class, so I was 80% in doing this. But this was not a one block off kind of a responsibility because it was year round. Some folks thought, well, you must get busy when the trips are taking place. I said, no, that's when I rest and worry. It's what are the courses that we're offering? Who are going to sponsor it? Do we have the descriptions? We're going to put the booklet together. How are we going to do the selection process? How are we going to do this one is out, but we've got some overflow. Is this one going to run because there aren't enough? So it was just a heck of a management process throughout the year.
And that's right after they get back because you got to plan for the next one.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and all the last second emergencies, this teacher can't make it or something like that. And then I got another bit of responsibility, and that was Dr. Tim Stewart was our principal at the high school, and he and the head of school, Dr. Chip Kimball, really liked the book. What was the book by Tony Wagner? It was kind of about progressive education and the global achievement gap.
Hey Siri.
It's the global achievement gap. I am getting old, so I'm forgetting these things. But we all read it. And they said, this is what kind of schools could be type of a book. And what made this book unique was the last few chapters said this isn't just talk, because so many of these books are talk and it's theory, but in practice there are no examples. And he put in about 4 examples of schools that were doing exactly the things that he was espousing, along the lines of progressive education, relevant, engaging work, the global achievement gap. And I had become a thought partner with Dr. Tim Stewart, the principal, and there were different opportunities to rethink the school, and he and I would have conversations about that. And then one day I said to him, Tim, it's you and I sitting here having a coffee and having these conversations, and we're not the experts. We're having a great time brainstorming ideas, and there was a big space that might have become available to really rethink education. And I said, we should visit these schools, the ones in the global achievement. He's like, yeah, but Tico, they're not going to see us. Who's your... I said, well, Tim, I emailed them all. And on this week, they're all available to meet us, and they'd be glad for us to go. And he said, really?
Did you go?
Oh, yeah. All we need is airplanes.
Awesome.
And Tim and I went to the States, and we visited some amazing schools that were doing really innovative things. And that was our first kind of R&D trip. And Dr. Chip Kimball supported that work. And so then after that, as SAS, we scaled it up. Instead of just Tim and I, it was bigger folks, teachers, leaders, everyone. And we did a lot of research on great practice. It included going to New Zealand and Australia and to Finland, and I led a lot of that work. I went on many of the trips, and I was organizing and helped coordinate that. And that's one of the examples that I say. And Tim said, hey, just stop teaching and let's just focus on this. And I said, no, I'm going to keep teaching. That's why I'm here.
Gosh.
I don't want to be a leader. I love doing this stuff, but I want to stay in the classroom.
I want to mention to our listeners, and some of them that haven't been overseas, some have been to schools that maybe don't do a lot of outreach, but one of the biggest draws of teaching overseas is a lot of times schools have those outreach trips that you're talking about, and you go with the kids on some of these trips. Sometimes you get the chance, sometimes you don't. And hats off to you for running that program for SAS. We know that Singapore American School is one of the top schools, in my opinion, in many opinions. And it's amazing that 58 different countries, there are trips going on.
Yeah.
And but the teachers are taking the students on some of those trips.
Yeah.
I've been at some schools, and JP has mentioned a couple of trips she's been on. So, wow, it's a great benefit to be at some schools overseas that do that.
That's right. And so, and that was a highlight of my week. Before I ran it, I went on the trips, and I loved being there. And I couldn't say that to my wife at the time because I thought I'd offend her. But this is the best week of my year, is being here with the kids. And the second part is something different. It was the adults going and doing research at different schools around the world and learning what to do. And then we would see which of those we might want to try out at SAS.
Well, I think the name Singapore American School opens a lot of doors. When you contact a school in Helsinki, Finland, and you say, we're part of Singapore American School, I think they're going to be like, yeah, sure, you can come and visit, no problem,
Yeah. And one of the things that makes Singapore American School was that it was a really, really good school at the time. So, everybody read that book, Good to Great. A lot of folks read Good to Great. We were one of those that was like great to greater. We were trying to just keep learning.
All right, let's take a moment for a little commercial about how to get in touch with us. You can, of course, find all 4 of us at the itpexpat.com. That's www.itpexpat.com.
Or you could also find us at email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Or if you're into Facebook, we have a new Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/ITPexpat, where you can find all kinds of inside information about ITP Expat.
You can also find us on Instagram at ITPXpats. That's with an S. ITPXpats is our handle.
All right, and thank you, listeners. We have over 100 countries represented by our listeners, and though we're not monetized, we are here for you, and we would like to thank all of you for listening. So let's get back to the show.
And so part of this was my story, and so I'm still teaching, but taking some blocks off. But then after that, the middle school also wanted to investigate some research and development and try to move forward as well. And they had a vice principal opening, and I decided to go ahead and apply for that one. And that's when I became a full-time leader, was going to the middle school there.
And at that point, it was probably a shoe-in. You had been there a few years and had done a number of different hats, worn a different hats.
Yeah, I think I was a known, when you're an internal candidate, there's not a lot to hide. I used to say that, look, I interview every day. So I'm interviewing now for this job. I'm doing the best I can, but I've been interviewing every day for a few years, haven't I? So you have to balance what you learn about me from the interview, from what you've learned about me and the things I've achieved. And funny enough, it's not a shoe-in because middle school teachers are proud. And so having a high school person come in and say, I'd like to be a middle school assistant principal, actually you have quite a barrier to overcome, is convincing folks that you do understand middle school kids and you do understand the unique characteristics of a middle school and the unique needs of a middle school. So that's one of the things I had to overcome for that position. Yes.
I have a good one for you. This is just a sidebar, but we are talking about Singapore American School. And one of our fellow podcasters out there has been on our show before. She is a TCK, and her name is Julia Walker. She's got her own her own podcast called Across Oceans. And she started, I don't know if you remember her as a student, if you even had her as a student. You've had many students. But I'm just throwing this out here. It's a shout out to Julia. She's still doing her podcast. She's one of our podcast friends.
She graduated from Singapore American.
She graduated from SAS. And her parents had both worked there at some point. They're in Switzerland now. And I know you have a little past with Switzerland also.
Yeah.
A connection, and so do I. But I just love it because she's a TCK with parents that taught overseas, and she does her podcast. A lot of her, if you ever listen to her podcast, she interviews other TCKs and talks about their lives after, like in college and now, what it was like to be a TCK and what it is now for that. So Across Oceans, if you ever get a chance to listen to it, for you and our listeners and watchers, it's a wonderful
She still
program.
Considers Singapore her home.
Her home.
She said she was conflicted because she has her passport country, Canada, that she hadn't really lived in. And then she had this long stint, I feel like it was at least 12 to 15 years spent at Singapore American, and graduated from there, and then went back to Canada and said, I kind of feel like Singapore is my home.
Sure. I'd like my kids to listen to that podcast, my kids.
And maybe they could even go on.
Yeah. It is interesting because I think my generation, if you went to these Dodd schools, we were third culture kids when there weren't so many of us, right?
Correct.
The kids of
your army or military. Yeah.
There weren't so many, but now there's so many third culture kids. And my kids are American passport and Thai passport. And then I'm Cuban American and, 100% Cuban blood for me, right? So my kids are half Cuban and half Chinese as far as ethnicity is concerned. So they've got this. So now they're both back in the States and it's like, I could take it or leave it because I don't particularly feel American. There's these things I like about the States. There's these things I don't like. But is this home?
That's what moving overseas does, is it opens up your perspectives on really we're just planet dwellers. and so they feel at home. They probably feel at home anywhere. Like you could pluck them and plop them onto any country, and they'll find themselves. They'll find their footing because of their background.
Yeah, that's so true. And that is something you get. It's like third culture folks, just drop them in a parachute anywhere, they'll probably figure it out, right? It's just like, I don't know what city I'm in, I'm going to make it work. I think you get that resilience, you get that flexibility, that figure out how to be happy and successful in a new and different place. Yeah.
So we mentioned Switzerland. Is that the next move from Singapore to Switzerland?
No, after that it was International School Bangkok. And so I went to Singapore
So there was one in between.
International School Bangkok, another just terrific school. I look, I'm like you. I left Singapore American School, and it's to this day I still think what an amazing place. I mean, just think about what I said. This is a school that is high performing, that doesn't rest on its laurels and keeps wanting to improve. That is so rare. And International School Bangkok, the sense of community there, the professionalism there was just terrific as well. So I continued to learn and grow in that role. And then I went to and as I said, my ex-wife at the time, we had met in business school in North Carolina. She was an exchange student. Well, not an exchange student. She was an international student from Thailand. So we met there and had been in together. And so I kind of thought it might make sense for the kids to be connected with their culture of Thailand. So we were there. And then, went to International School Basel and became middle school principal, and then later became high school principal at International School Basel. Yeah.
Wow. What a great story.
These jobs now, are you finding them still through job fairs, or is it now kind of word of mouth with your network?
Yeah, that's really important. I'm glad you said that. One of the things when we talked about job fair and the beauty of job fairs is I hope your listeners understand your network is your net worth is kind of a saying in business. I think it's so much more important even in international schools, right? Your network is everything. And so when I'm helping, as I said, I'm helping aspiring leaders, and, it's immediate, like, what school are you targeting? Who do you know there? Do you know anyone who knows someone there? You just have to make these connections, because if not, you're just going to be a piece of paper on a pile of pieces of paper. And so, I think it is an interesting story. My story with International School Basel is I was looking for a principal position. I had been looking at a few different places. It was a time in my life where I felt I could be choosy. It was a time of confidence, if you understand what I mean. And so there were a few opportunities that didn't quite resonate with me. And so then the head of school I worked for in Singapore American Schools, his name's Bob Gross. He was doing a 1-year head of school interim position at International School Basel. And we had someone in common who said, I just talked to Bob. And I said, oh, my goodness, how's Bob doing? He's great. I think the world of Bob. And so he's at International School Basel doing this 1-year gig. And I remember thinking, wow, there's a middle school principal position there, and for some reason I discounted it. I didn't really look into it. Well, that's one of these things. The universe is talking, so let me just reach out to Bob, see how he's doing. I reached out to Bob. How are you doing? He wrote back right away, because Bob is that type of person. He also values connection, so he wrote back right away. And then I said, Bob, I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually doing a principal search. I didn't look into Basel so much. Is there anything you want to tell me about that? And he said, well, here's what I want to tell you about that. We've got our final list of 3 already. And so we closed the search. And I said, well, that's a bummer. But, man, I'm so glad we kept in touch,
Timing,
and reconnected. So he called me back in 3 hours. And he said, are you available tomorrow for an interview? I said, okay.
Whoa.
There's process, and then there's Bob, And Bob said, as long as it makes sense, let's give Tico a shot. And so he allowed me to interview. And so I sent in all my stuff. It was fall break. And so I've got someone, I remember the high school principal at the time is talking, and he did a little thing, with his phone, and he's in the mountains skiing. Right. And so everyone was on their break in different places in Europe.
Oh, wow.
And we zoomed in together for the interview. I had a follow up with Bob, and then I made the finalist and was flown to Basel. And I was, I was great. I was offered and took the position as a middle school principal there. And the reason I partly I shared the story is you just never know. I have someone who just said, it looks like it's closed. And I'm like, anyway. You just don't know. They might be satisfied with the final.
You should not be the one. Yeah, you should not be the one turning yourself down from job opportunities. Let the head of school do that. Just try, right?
That's great advice. Great advice. And if you're in this world, you know how many times there's been a final group and then the decision makers say, and we're not satisfied and we're going to restart. So you might as well try, because you never know how it's going to go. So, yeah. So then I was there at International School Basel, and now I decided to have a little more. Again, I'm aging as well, and so I wanted a lifestyle where I had a little more choice on where I could be. And so I decided to move into more leadership coaching and some consulting work.
All right.
So we're getting to we're at 50 minutes, and we're getting to the area why I invited you on the show. Mind you, I should say, like, this has been gold. This has been a bonus to hear your background and your story. But I reached out to you for ALOC, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the associations you mentioned also you're on a board of another one I've never even heard of. So let's talk a little bit about that shift and what are these organizations for our listeners, many of our listeners, curious as well about what are these things.
Okay. Well, let me start with the other one since we're going to spend a little more time with ALOC.
Yeah.
Just like there's ISCA, International Schools Counselors Association, Counseling Association. There's Senya,
Cheryl Brown.
Education.
Yes.
Yeah. And so instructional coaching didn't have an international association with it. And it's one that's really misunderstood. Like, what does an instructional coach really do is something that often folks don't know what to do. And the remit gets wide. Well, will you run the standardized tests for us, or will you run the TRIPS program for us? No, I'm supposed to make sure that there's good, high-quality teaching and learning going on in the classrooms. And so with all these misunderstandings, then Kim Cofino and a close-knit group of instructional coaches decided this could be something that would be a real benefit. And so it's like all of 6 months old. This group, and it already, we've got, I want to say 18 schools or so, and lots of instructional coaches who are part of it. And so we share best practices, help consult schools with how to do it well, so that the instructional coaching is effective in the schools. And so it's been great to be a part of that and be on the board. And I tend to roll up my sleeves and get a bit operational with them as well. So that's been great. And look, the big picture is you do hit, you were talking about your age, JP, and where you just hit this place where you're thinking, I want to do meaningful work with people I care about. And I care about the international education world. That's my tribe. That's my sense of belonging. And now here's a group that's trying to do something good, and I can help. Let me do that, and money really starts going down, and, especially if you've been decent about savings. And by the way, that's the other piece of advice I'm sure you get into. Save money. Don't get paid a decent salary and think that now you deserve 5-star meals and 5-star hotels. If you're American, you're not going to get Social Security. You've got to really think ahead about your personal finance. But if you do,
Tico, you're sounding like a fellow colleague of yours, perhaps, Andrew Hallam. Did you ever work with him?
Are you kidding? Andrew Hallam's one of my best friends. We just travel. we keep in touch all the time.
There we go. So, millionaire teacher and fantastic speaker to international circuits about putting that money aside, those tax-free dollars, putting it aside. I actually credit Andrew Hallam and Mark Zorel from Plan Vision for my retirement at 49 years old, because I started to save all those tax-free dollars and was able to retire early.
Yeah. So sorry, it's not a plug. Andrew doesn't need to sell more books.
It can be a plug. No, it's a plug. We love Andrew. He was a great guest on our show.
Yeah, he came on the show. It's a network.
Yeah. So read The Millionaire Teacher for those of you listening. And so, but I am hitting that age where it's more about meaningful work, maintaining connections, doing things I care about. And that brings us to ALOC. And when I was teaching and working, a massive school like Singapore American School, we had more New Zealanders than we did have people of color, right? And it was the adult world was very white. Faculty was very white when I was in international schools initially. And the color was usually local staff that were maybe cutting the grass or serving food in the cafeteria. So the demographics of the student body were beautiful, but the demographics of the faculty weren't so much. And so it's something that I've cared about for a while. It's I don't know if it's been an area of passion.
You miss out so much. You miss out so much.
Even in university, I went to a very white university as well, and so just awareness and understanding of the beauty of diversity. And we weren't there. I think
and our students need to see themselves represented in all echelons, like as you say, not just in the cafeteria or in the gardening maintenance staff, but also in teachers and leadership. They need to see themselves represented.
Okay,
Absolutely.
What does ALOC stand for our listeners and for myself?
Okay, right, fantastic. So ALOC is Association of International Educators and Leaders of Color. And it was started by Kevin Simpson, and again with the support of like-minded folks. And it's to help international schools move forward in this world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when you think about kind of that history of international schools, there is a colonial past to our international schools, and the promise of international schools is graduating global citizens with a global mindset, as you say. We all share the same planet. Whereas in reality, were we just trying to train people to behave like Western white people, right? And so,
correct.
Can we? Yeah. And so ALOC's done great work, and I think in the last few years, so have other associations that maybe weren't doing as well earlier in the process. So, and I do mean like the Search Associates and the ISSs and things like that had a way of doing things and hadn't questioned their way of doing things. I think ALOC helped raise awareness, and to give credit to these other groups, they have moved forward at pace, and it's really promising to see how ISS has really centered a lot of this work. So has Search Associates, so have other groups. So,
and I also want to give a shout out to another group out there that's doing a lot of great work, and we had them on the show, I think, or you had them on the show, Greg. Dr. Alan Fan from Diversity Collective.
The Diversity Collective.
Sudanam.
Yep.
They, I just got an email from them, and I was excited to see a different person sending the email. It was a subscriber list.
They're growing.
I was like, they're growing, and it's so fantastic to know that schools are joining the Diversity Collective to give those underrepresented groups more voice in the international circuit.
That's right. Yeah, they're doing great work with the Diversity Collective, and Carney Sandoz Search and ISS are also trying to diversify their perspective on how they do the recruitment as well, to ensure that they're giving a diverse pool of candidates or giving opportunities for a diverse group of candidates. And things are changing fast. It's nice.
Yeah.
So
and can you
ALOC
tell us a little bit? Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about what your role is in ALOC now? Sure.
And so I'm one of the programs within ALOC is Aspiring Leaders of Color program. And so, folks of color who are teachers but aspire to leadership get mentoring. And so this program provides some seminars and some sessions to teach two parts. One is, what does it take to be a good leader? So there's a session on change management, for example, or on budgeting, finance. So there are courses related to this. And then there's also courses related to the recruitment. What's a good resume look like, and a cover letter and interview skills. And so we're trying to support potential candidates in that way. And we match up every candidate with a mentor, an existing leader, so that they can meet one-on-one and also get the support. And the alumni are doing fantastically. They're rising in international schools. So the program's wonderful.
And presumably this would be online courses, not in person?
That's right. Yeah, it's online when we have these sessions, and we share and help the cohort learn. So, ALOC has many programs, and the Aspiring Leaders of Color program is one, and it's one that's closest to my heart, as I said. I mean, when I was at Singapore American School, I think I was the only person of color in the leadership team at the time. Maybe there was another, and it's a huge leadership team because Singapore American School is big.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing so much more diversity, both in faculty and in leadership. And so that's the part that I found most interesting within ALOC and where I wanted to contribute. So my role is helping to coordinate the program, right? Yeah.
And reaching out to those like us of a certain age that have an expertise, reaching out to them and saying, hey, do you want to pay it forward by becoming a mentor for our up and coming?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so those connections, so we have two big groups, as you heard, that contribute: a mentor group that are partnered, and then another group that presents and share their expertise with the group as well. And that's what the program looks like. And then we have a new cohort every year. Yeah.
Wow.
So for our listeners that are interested in going further with this, because it sounds exciting, and we are getting a larger and larger listening audience and watching audience over 130 countries, and hopefully we have more leaders of color and underrepresented groups coming through, right? How do they start? How do they get in touch with ALOC, or can you give us a little direction for that for our listeners?
Sure. So ALOC has a website, aieloc.org. You said this at the very start of the podcast. There's a lot of letters associated, but that is the nature of international schools. We have a lot of letters. So ALOC is aieloc.org, and there you can find information. And if you're interested in applying as a mentee, someone to be a candidate in the cohort, or if you want to apply to be a mentor, that's where you can do it. And the person who runs it is just a fantastic man named Kevin Simpson. He's just wonderful, and he's really made a big difference in the world. Him and a group of like-minded folks. I couldn't name them all, but it's a real I don't know how to say it. It's like a journey of love, where a lot of folks are volunteering their time and giving to this program in particular, to ALOC in general. So,
and is there a cost, without going into the money? Is there a cost, or is this free?
Oh, great question. There is a cost, and there are some sponsors who help allay that cost. So, for example, ISS actually sponsors a few scholarships for candidates to be a part of it.
So apply even if you think the answer might be no.
I am so glad that you asked that question. I'm so glad you asked that question. That's right.
She's good, isn't she?
But
She's really good.
No, well, because I'm already thinking about some of my clients, and I've already put them in touch with you, Tico, if they've started to reach out with. Speaking of which, can people find you on LinkedIn? That's how I found you. So is it your profile kind of open?
It is open, and so I'm Tico Oms on LinkedIn. And another thing that I offer, and so, again, I'm saying this, I do this because I want to do meaningful work with people I care for. Eventually, I'd like to make some money doing some things, but really, I am helping a lot of folks with their resumes, their cover letters, and their interviewing pro bono, and I'm enjoying that work. So it's no problem. So some aspiring leaders contact me through other folks, and I'm kind of known as someone who will, look at your documentation,
spot check,
and then do an hour conversation pro bono to support folks in that work, whether you're part of the cohort of aspiring leaders of color or not. I will chat with you, and I'll try to support you.
And for this leadership coaching, do you have a website or some kind of social media we can follow you on?
No, I'm in LinkedIn, and it's funny you say this because I'm ex-business, and my position at Dell, when I told you about that was a marketing position, right? So I was in charge of marketing. I don't know if I'm convinced that the work goes into a website is worth it. Is it more word of mouth?
Oh, I can tell you it is.
Is it worth it?
I can tell you, 3rd year of business, I can tell you it is. And it doesn't take much. I mean, you with your expertise of tech, it wouldn't take much to create a website, and then just that way you have a place for people. Yeah, you have a place for people to go to. That's why I have JP Mint Consulting. It's so that when people want to pass on the name or the word, then it's a place for people to go find me.
See, now I was already glad I was on the podcast, or what are we calling it? A video cast?
It's a podcast still, but we're just doing vodcasting now too. Yeah,
I was already happy, and now I'm even more happy because you just helped me get through a little conundrum of wondering, do I invest in it? To be fair, I'm going slow because I want to see how these things balance. I, like a lot of folks that have a little bit of an entrepreneur, I tend to stretch myself a little too much because I have there's people who don't say no. And some of them don't say no because they're a little insecure or they're trying to prove themselves or, etc. I'm one of those who can't say no because I just get excited about everything. Everything's exciting. Oh, let me try this. And so I'm like trying to, in my old age, keep myself from going too far too fast.
Well, I think it comes from years of saying yes. I think we're all kind of yes people in that good sense, not yes men, but yes people, like yes to this and yes to that challenge. And, school reaches out and school reached out and I never even heard of the country. I said, yes, let put me on a plane. Let's see what it's like. So after years of yes, maybe it's now time to be a little bit more discerning and we can say no occasionally.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are you saying, Greg?
Please don't say no to this next question. We're getting towards the end of our show, and I don't want to leave us without giving us and maybe sharing with us a police story.
Oh, yeah.
A harmless one, not something from overseas, like if you got into a little, like something funny or something non-personal.
Cultural gaffe.
Yeah. This is, when someone's asked this, they probably go back later and go, and that wasn't the story I should have shared. So this is the story that comes up, and later on, I'll say, why did I say that? The one that comes to mind is, when you're younger and you're idealistic and you're like, okay, there's these things I'm flexible about, and there's these things that you look back and go, really, that was the hill you're going to die on? And so, I was in Bangkok and I was driving. I had a car at the time. So this is, when I was in business, I also lived in Bangkok for 1 year as part of business. And so I was driving and, if you live in Thailand, when it's payday time because everyone's getting pulled over and they do the stops. And then they find something wrong so they can get a little bit of money. So, so you just see there's just a time of the month where you're thinking, is this payday month or what's going on? But it was pullover time. Fair enough. I actually got pulled over my registration sticker was out. So I got pulled over and they're talking and I'm like, give me the ticket. And they're like, no, give me the 400 baht, which is, a bit more than $10. I said, I'm going to take the ticket. So I'm being idealistic. You give me the ticket, I'll pay the ticket. Let's go through the right process. But why would you want to do that? You're going to have to go to the police station to pay.
Paper trail.
I may have to leave, usually because we don't have your ID and can't make sure that you're going to pay, you might leave. I'm going to have to take your driver's license, which he had and all this stuff. So it came, and so I said, no, I just want the ticket. Just give me the ticket. Let's do it right. And, and he, Thais are just so kind and warm in general. And he was never frustrated, but it was, what are you doing? Just give me the money. And so finally,
you're not doing this right.
Advisor, right? I was like, no, I got all day right now. I'm going to stay. Just give me the ticket. And he came over. And so I had a few folks, but I mean, to be honest with you, about 15 minutes later, I finally paid because it was like, there is no plan B, Tico. There's only a plan A. it's
wow.
You got waited out.
I know.
You tried to wait it out, but it didn't happen.
Exactly. So that's
another question we have, Tico. In all your travels, is there 3 things that you need to feel comfortable in your next home?
Oh, good question. Yeah. Well, let's start with the obvious one: Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Netflix and all that. And sports. I'm going to translate that question with things that I just make sure that I take with me because they help make things grow. I have a great little mini speaker because I like music and I like podcasts. So I always take the mini speaker with me as something I do. And then the last one is just what I like. I think earlier we were just kind of having a conversation of different things, but I take my tennis racket with me. And the tennis racket isn't just about the tennis. It's really about, and this is how I'm going to make connections with folks. I'm going to find a tennis center. I used to play soccer. I used to travel around with a frisbee and a chess set, like on the outside of my backpack, so people could see. These are just ways of trying to drive connection. And for me now, tennis is a big source or tool that I use to make connections wherever I go.
Well, we
Look,
were talking about pickleball. So is that something that's in your wheelhouse now, Tico?
It has become, except pickleball is very American. Tennis is still more global, and in a lot of other countries, they play a sport that's called Dell, which is a little pickleballish tennis.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I hear you, but
We just heard from a new listener, not a new listener, but we heard from one of our listeners, and this is the new Greg, Tico. I am now I'm reaching out to our audience on video and on podcast, saying, please get back to us. We had actually an email from one of our listeners, Sarah, and she said, I'll quote her, it says, about pickleball, it's now a big thing in Australia, but I recall learning it in the 80s when I was in primary school. So she's answering one of our other podcasts saying, hey, about pickleball, yes. So I'm hoping that some of our listeners reach out to us and tell us about some of those other great schools, maybe some great leaders, maybe some leaders that are of color that are going to start reaching out to us and saying, hey, I loved your episode, love talking with Tico. Maybe you have some fans out there. We are on email, and they can call us. They can email us and reach out to us.
Call us.
Yeah. Well, no, they can't. Did I say that? I forgot. Okay. It's so hard to edit that out too, right? You can call Kent. You can call Kent at 053.
Here's his number. We'll put it up on the bottom of the screen.
He's not here.
That's
we
what
got him. At all hours of the night, you can call Kent.
Yeah.
Oh.
So Tico, wrapping up here, do you have any final words for our listening audience and our viewing audience about teaching internationally?
Oh, yeah, great. Well, look, I was going to finish a thought too. Like, think about why. I was about to make a comment and said that tennis thing is related to why I go abroad. I go abroad, and you heard me say I learn languages. I learn Japanese. I learn Thai. Mine is all about connection. I love going and connecting, both with other international folks, but also with local folks as well. And that's why I do it. And I think that would be one of the things that I would ask folks to reflect on is when you're driven to go internationally, what is the big driver? What do you want to get out of it? And be comfortable with that. And I hope that up there is the sense of connecting with the local culture and with the local folks as well. So for me, that's the beauty of the life.
And people didn't have to go on a 10-day silent retreat to get that advice.
Look, Greg, if you ever want to do it, I'll partner with you, okay? Except for those 10 days we have to ignore each other. But
oh my gosh.
On behalf of the ITP, the International Teacher Podcast, I am Greg. I'd like to say thank you to JP, first of all, for joining us and leading this conversation. And you can find her at jpmintconsulting.com on the internet to sign up. And she's wearing mint right now if you're watching us. I would like to say extend a warm thank you to Tico for joining us, and you can always reach out to Jose Oms, known as Tico, and make a connection with him because he's all about connections. But if you're ever driving in Thailand with Tico, make sure he just pays off that police officer.
Don't wait an hour.
Don't wait on it because it'll take an hour, okay?
We don't have all the Tico.
Exactly. No, Tico, no. On behalf of Kent, who is not here, you can reach him in, I think it's 304. Is that what he said? Room 304? And you can call him at the phone number on the screen anytime
Look
of night.
us up on YouTube.
So thank you very much, everybody. We will see you next episode. It's been real.